Welcome everyone. This is a webinar and a chat about the Chinese Medicine Nutrition Diploma that the Northern College of Acupuncture offers. I'm Hannah Swift and I'll do a bit of an intro to the course and a bit of an intro to myself and a webinar about autumn foods. So just in case anyone's here just popping in and then heading off, I just want to flag up that the Chinese Medicine Nutrition Diploma starts in January 2026 and it's about a 6-month course. It's 30 weeks and it's absolutely brilliant and it's online with a team of expert teachers, and I highly recommend it, as do all of the students that have done it. So just in case you're just popping on and then you're going to head off, just check out the diploma. We'll send out a link in case you don't know where to look. So that's that bit. And then I'm going to tell you about what we'll talk about for the next 40 minutes or so. So I'm going to talk a little bit about autumn foods and what is relevant about food in the autumn for well-being, for the body. And we'll be looking at 2 cases. So these are imagined cases, though when you see them, you'll think, yes, I know people like that. And looking at what kinds of foods we might suggest to those cases. So I really welcome you to have a pen and a bit of paper with you and to jot down ideas as we go. And you might even want to start off by jotting down ideas about what autumn food means to you now, like what comes to mind, what autumn harvest or harvest rituals come to mind when you think about food this time of year. And just bear with me. Okay, never mind. Technical inquiry there. Yeah, so let's start with a little poem. So, a year of bountiful harvest, in every rice paddy the moon rises. So this is a haiku, which is a Japanese form of poem, and it's been translated. So if you've ever written a haiku in English, it has a certain number of syllables. But if you translate a haiku and you want the meaning to get translated, sometimes you have to not do the right number of syllables in English. And so I love this little poem because it captures something about celebration. And I think autumn has that nature. It has this kind of what has the year given us to survive through the winter? And yeah, holding that up or offering that to the moon is such a beautiful human, very human thing to do. Okay, so that was a bit of poetry. Now the introduction to me. So I studied acupuncture. I graduated from the Northern College of Acupuncture, where I now work. And I graduated 10 years ago. And I ran rural and urban clinics in the UK for 8 years before I moved to Japan to study moxibustion. And that is what I am up to at the moment. And I'm a tea lover of all sorts of teas. And at the moment, I'm drinking my housemate's ume cola. So ume is plum, like plum cola, which is amazing for kind of, it's a bit spicy and salty and sweet, and it's amazing for this hot, sweaty time of year that we're living in currently in Japan. And this year we made miso for the first time, and it was a big kind of festivity when we got it out of the hole under our floor where it had been kept, and we gathered round with a group of friends and we sang to the miso as it came out of the floor. And it's a white miso, so it's a very pale miso paste. But I'd like to get into making other kinds and see what characteristics they have. Yeah, so that's a little intro to me. So let's think about late summer and autumn as a gateway or a transitional time we can think about it in our lifetimes as a kind of the later part of one's life or the beginning of the later part of one's life. So kind of in women's uh, fertile cycles, it would be kind of menopausal time would be kind of late summer, or perimenopause would be late summer, autumn. But we can think about it in terms of the day. So late summer in the day is kind of just kind of 4 or 5 p.m. It depends on the time of year, doesn't it? But kind of as we're turning into dusk. And then we can think about it literally in the season. So it's a kind of rich time where we're harvesting what we've generated through the summer, through the season of the warmest time of year. And often transitions in our lives and in seasons and in the day have this capacity to bring with them healing potential. It's like there's an active shift in the body, in the chemistry of the body that enables other shifts to happen. So if something's been chronically lingering, sometimes it can shift in a seasonal transition. So that's why in one of the 5 element systems, where each element is listed, you put earth in between all of the elements, because in between the seasons, there's this transitory time where things come back to earth. And sometimes that's seen in the cycle of the seasons in terms of a kind of rainy few days at the end of the summer, or a dry few days at the end of the winter before the spring. You know, these kind of transitional times where there's something that's settling about the previous season before the next one arises. With climate change, it's changing. Those things are changing, and we're having to figure out how to adapt to that. So that's very relevant for our health, and climate change is impacting our health in many, many ways. Nonetheless, even if the literal seasons are changing, we can still look to the old ways and old food systems for medicine in those transitions whenever they happen. And sometimes you can even see those transitions happening in the body out with the season. So it's worth bearing that in mind, that these are just natural cycles, energetic cycles that can happen, going from like a hot period into a cooler period, and that can happen in the middle of winter as well. So it's also like a body pattern. Yeah. So let's have a little think about our TCM. So we've got our lung, large intestine, spleen, and stomach. So these are the wintry autumn organs, and then the spleen, stomach for this like transition period. So these are the organs which are kind of working together in order to help you secure a healthy transition. So I've just put down there all of the things I could think of that came to mind. You might have other things that come to mind about these organs. I always find those things interesting that have when organs come into language, into kind of folk language, and understanding the function or the emotion of the organ through something like having the guts to do something brave, or sick to the stomach with worry. So the emotional component, it's easy to think of it as a cultural thing, but I think that there's a lot of evidence that would suggest that these organ associations are cross-cultural. Of course, there are contradictions, and that's quite interesting as well, interesting territory. But where it's the same, it's quite interesting that this human body, which is so diverse in its manifestation, can also be quite similar across the board. So when we're coming into autumn, I think we often see in the UK, I often saw in my clinic, people's immunity dropping. That was like one of the most common things. People who were suffering with cold also just having like an increase of whatever their symptoms are: back pain, cold feet at night, fertility issues, menstrual pain. All of that could start to worsen with the kind of coming in of the cold. So some of these things that we're going to look at in the next two with these two patients that I'm bringing to the table won't apply to everybody, but may help like think about how to support some of those people who would be showing up at this time of year. You can pop questions in the chat as we go, because there's quite a few people on today. I'm not going to take verbal questions until the very end, but feel free just to kind of pipe up or share thoughts as you go. Okay, here we have Jez. So Jez is an imagined patient for for reasons of confidentiality. No, he really is imagined. He's really doesn't exist, but he's very familiar. So Jez, 32, has spent the last 2 weeks camping with his family in northern Scotland. It was windy every day with fluctuating temperatures. Holiday food was a mixture of rehydrated fast foods, eating at nearby eateries, i.e. fish and chips, and fry-ups on the campfire. His eczema has flared up around elbows and knees. He has upper backache and bloating after meals, particularly in the evening. Okay, so maybe on your paper, just jot down, what are you thinking? Like, what does this ring of diagnostically? What's going on there? There might be a few different things. There's not one answer. Also, there'll be no test. So don't worry if you feel at sea. Maybe just focus on one thing. Yeah, have a look. So I flagged up a few things here. So patient reported it was windy weather. I'm wondering, could that be the origin of his back pain? Also, he's been camping and maybe it wasn't very comfortable. Or maybe he has chronic backache. In this context, we don't know and we haven't got the capacity to ask him those questions. So just wondering, back pain origin maybe. Fluctuating temperature can just challenge the qi, particularly the wei qi, the defensive qi, which is connected to immune system function. Could also be connected to eczema. So fast foods, I'm thinking heat, damp, potentially. It's not true that all fast foods are heat and damp producing, but when things have been really dehydrated and they're full of additives, they often are heat and damp producing. There's nothing dogmatic here, so please don't come away from this thinking, oh no, she said this. But I'm just kind of wanting you to chew over what the information is and how it could apply to somebody's diagnostic patterns. So fry-ups, heating, eczema flare is a heat sign. So the body's trying to clear some heat there potentially. Upper backache could be sleep position. We don't know. Bloating, I'm thinking bloating in a way is the most interesting part of this picture, I think, because we've got bloating that could affect the diaphragm. So that could be triggering the upper back pain. We could have stomach and lung involvement there, because the diaphragm is the kind of barrier, the transitory place between those two organs, between the stomach and the lung. So when the stomach's kind of irritated from bloating, it could affect the lung. So bloating is, that's an interesting one. That kind of makes me want to hone in on that for his diet. Like, let's try and resolve the bloating and see if there's a ripple. You know how it is with clinic that sometimes someone comes with this enormous list of things and you have to decide to start somewhere. You could approach it, and every practitioner will approach it from different angles, but sometimes you start from one place and then there's this lovely kind of ripple effect through their reporting of symptoms and their experience of symptoms. So also what could be disturbed through this diet that he's had over the last 2 weeks could be his microbiome, so the microbial diversity in his gut, that if it's basically lacking in diversity, it could cause bloating because there's just not adequate diversity to process all of the nutrients that he's putting into his body, and also the nutrients are lacking in the first place. So it's a chicken and an egg microbiome and digestive capacity and poor nutrients. They can weave in and out of each other. So have a think. What are you going to recommend to Jez? What kind of, if you were to offer him a dinner, what would you say? What would you say? Do you know what, Jez? If you've got time to do some cooking this week, this is what I'm going to recommend. I'm going to offer something, but you can have a little think. So I'm thinking something that will restore his microbiome, reduce inflammatory heat in his system, and help him embrace a healthy autumn. So it's super simple, but the microbiome around this bloating issue kind of is central to my thinking. Okay, so a warm tofu and aubergine glow bowl. So maybe he's the kind of guy that likes a nice recipe name. So you can call it that. So with this dish, I'm suggesting that he cooks his veg in water instead of oil. So it might sound very grim if you're an oil lover, as I am, but actually it can be very delicious if you do it just in a pan. Like, you heat up the pan first, you add your veg, and then you just add like a little bit of water as you go. So you're not like, they're not swimming around in water. You just have like a cup on the side, and you keep them moist, and they kind of steam up into a nice sauce. So it can be really lovely and doesn't feel like you're lacking in anything. And these are just autumn veggies, but you could use whatever you've got locally, whatever's around. Ideally organic, or ideally from your allotment or whatever. But Jez has been eating fish and chips, and he's probably not that interested. And actually, that's fine. That will mean he gets lots of fiber, and it means he gets lots of polyphenols from the colourful veg. There's lots of vitamins and minerals in that. And with adding silken tofu, so you might be familiar with all the different types of tofu, and you might not be. In Japan, there's like a long walkway in the supermarket of types of tofu, and often if in the UK there's just like 3 or 4 in the fridge of a supermarket. So you can go for the silken one or a harder one, but silken tofu doesn't need to be cooked, so it's really nice in something like this where you're trying to reduce heat in the system and make something that's really easy to digest. It can be lovely, and you can just add it at the end of the cooking process. It also means that if the dish is really hot, literally the temperature is really hot, and you add the silken tofu, it cools it down. So it's kind of bringing it into that moderate heat zone, which is much easier to digest. And sometimes you find with people who have a lot of heat that they're actually the kind of people that like to eat things really hot. So it might be worth saying to Jez, hey, it'd be really great if you could just start eating food that's a little bit cooler, a bit more of a moderate temperature. Then you've got to make it delicious, right? So sesame seeds and soy sauce do help with the deliciousness factor. So you can just dry roast or dry toast the sesame seeds on a pan. That takes like less than a minute, depends how many you're toasting, but you heat the pan first, add the sesame, toss them around until it smells nice. And that if they're white sesame seeds, they'll have gone kind of golden, and if they're black sesame seeds, just watch out because they won't change color, but they'll just get more tasty. If you want to make sesame seeds even more digestible, then grind them up in a pestle and mortar just before you eat them, so that they're really freshly ground. Because sometimes you'll find sesame seeds undigested in stool, so there's not much goodness that's come out of them in that case. Yeah, so you could serve this with rice or noodles or whatever you like. So I just want to like hone in on the soy sauce bit. This is a tiny detail, but quite significant. So let's just have a look in praise of soy sauce. So when soy sauce is naturally fermented, There are lots of different kinds of soy sauce, but if you get a naturally fermented soy sauce, it produces small amounts of beneficial compounds like lactic acid bacteria and peptides, which can support the digestion and gut microbial diversity. So it is just a little topping at the end, but it's really significant. So second thing about soy sauce is that it's umami rich, which means that it's extra delicious. So you can sometimes reduce salt intake if you use soy sauce instead. So with someone who's got a lot of heat, you want to be careful about how much salt you're putting into their diet because it's drying and therefore heating. So if they can get into using soy sauce instead, it might be a nice, or as well as, just so that there's more variety in their diet, then it can be really helpful. And then lastly, fermented soybeans basically help your body absorb other nutrients like iron, calcium, and magnesium. Whereas if it's not been fermented, it can block the absorption of those minerals. So it's quite interesting looking at traditional food systems. So in Japan, you often have edamame or soy beans at the beginning of your meal before you have anything else. So you don't have them alongside other things. And I think it's probably for this reason. It's interesting what kind of traditions and customs last and have obvious health benefits that we're kind of unpacking now through science, but that may be one of them. Whereas soy sauce you would have throughout your meal with almost everything, because it has all these benefits and it can help also slightly break food down while it's on your plate so that it's more digestible. Okay, case two. Also an imaginary person who you will know. I'm sure you've met Sheila before in your clinic. So Sheila, 48, has been teaching volleyball all summer at a kids camp where they ate cheese and tomato sandwiches for lunch every day. She's come for acupuncture for a long time to support her mental health. She's prone to burnout with balancing, caring for elderly parents, and running her own business. She describes feeling tired after meals, having sugar cravings, cold feet at night, and waking up several times a night to pee. Okay, what are you thinking? What are your diagnostics? What comes to mind? Just have a little write down or focus on one thing. Sandwiches get a bad rap, don't they? Sorry for the pun. But they it does depend a lot what's in the sandwich. Like what's the quality of the bread, what's the quality of the cheese, what's the quality of the tomato. So I might ask her about that if I'm honest, but I think I'm imagining that they're quite like white bread, cheap cheese sandwiches that are kind of mass produced by a caterer every morning for all of the kids and Sheila at the camp. That's what I'm imagining with her. Just to put it out there that these are not sourdough homemade sandwiches. So I went through this. I've just underlined what she reported and kind of my thinking about that. So with those sandwiches, cold and damp can be one of the factors. And because it's warm and summer and she's been exercising and busy, it's probably less likely to be bringing in significant coldness into her system, but probably more the damp side of things. Like it would be balanced by her kind of metabolic activity, right? She wouldn't necessarily develop coldness just from that. And of course, I also want to say that white bread sandwiches with cheap cheese and cheap tomatoes that are not very delicious can be essential food sources for many people at different times of their life in different circumstances. So I'm not dissing them in general, but we're just looking at the nuance of what's going on there. Because of course, sometimes some food is definitely better than no food, right? So I just want to kind of bring that in to this kind of food picture that we're looking at. We don't need everybody to have luxury food, but simple changes can make a big difference. So she's referring to burnout again, or she's prone to burnout, and it looks like she's kind of on that edge, like toppling back into burnout again with being tired after meals and sugar cravings. Like these symptoms kind of make me feel things are a bit out of balance at the moment, and we need to be a bit careful to try and nudge her back into balance. So, chi deficiency is on the cards. Um, Balancing caring with business. I'm also thinking about earth element, the kind of giving nature of earth element people, and sometimes that they overgive and they don't leave enough resources in themselves to replenish their own body systems. And possibly with running her own business, her metal element is being exerted. So again, that kind of like processing what's valuable within the body of the large intestine and the lung can be a bit diminished because she's kind of expending that externally. Tired after meals could be to do with coldness, could be to do with the lack of digestive enzymes. Um, Certainly, like that kind of sandwichy kind of lunch doesn't evoke much enzyme activity. Um, yeah, if she was having like rocket and tomato sandwiches, then it'd be like, ah, there might be some enzymes, there might be some digestive enzymes that are being produced from that, the bitterness of the rocket. Um, but there's no bitterness there, so could be like that her gut is just getting landed with a sandwich with no warning. Um, yeah, weak microbiome, yeah, lack of diversity from also having eaten the same meal every day, which is like a kind of there's a lack of diversity there. Um, Sugar cravings indicate something going on with her blood sugar, so possibly not having adequate fats and proteins, especially for such an active day. So maybe not having a big breakfast, maybe she's like not quite charged up, and then she's relying on that lunch to kind of keep her going, and then her blood sugar is kind of crashing. Um, and then having that craving for whatever sugary snack takes her fancy. Cold feet at night. Again, it's that kind of cold qi deficiency, yang deficiency, and waking to pee. Again, kidney, yang deficiency. Could be. You could classify all of these symptoms into other camps, but this kind of broad brushstroke. And thinking about food, you are kind of thinking about broad brushstroke a lot of the time. So you are just thinking, okay, is what's going on here? This person is generally a bit cold. They're generally a bit lacking in energy, and we want to just support their system to get the most nutrients out of their food and the most warmth, easily available warmth. So what would you recommend to Sheila? Yeah, how would you suggest to her that she cooks her next dinner? So I'm thinking of foods that would warm her up, improve her digestion, blood sugar balance, increase her energy, reduce bloating, and help her embrace a healthy autumn. So here's the golden coconut belly warmer. Um, Full of warming spices and easy to batch cook. So if she wants to freeze it, she can freeze it and warm up portions as she goes through her busy life. Um, so all of these foods are kind of governed by metal element. Actually, same with the last lot of foods. Um, so thus being relevant to the autumn. All of the kind of these top onion, garlic, ginger, coriander, cumin all have that pungency that just keeps things moving. It keeps the circulation going. It helps with the dispersal of qi, so it helps kind of with that yang movement in the body. Where like the carrot and squash are more governed by earth, but they're often available in the autumn in the northern hemisphere. So you've got that kind of um, earthy, substantial, sweet, easy to digest, soft, nurturing, um, warming veg quality that can hold all of that yang. So it's not just like yang that's going to make you really hot and sweaty, but it's like balanced yang within the meal. Again, like cooking that with the coconut oil means that you're giving the spices like a body to sit within. And the fat content helps with the absorption of fat soluble vitamins. So it's really good for somebody like Sheila to have nice fat, nice oils in their diet, because otherwise you're maybe introducing lots of spices and like things that are so-called adaptogenic or anti-inflammatory, but actually if they've not got that body of oil and fat to hold them, that they're actually kind of just going to make you sweat, and it's not going to be a very kind of balanced experience for the body. So with the cooking style, I'm also going to recommend that she uses creamed coconut, because rather than milk, coconut milk, because creamed coconut is easy to buy. It comes in little cardboard boxes, and often it doesn't have lots of additives in it, whereas coconut milk in a tin often has lots of other things. So I would say to Sheila, just check in the supermarket what you're actually buying, because sometimes the like creamed coconut is just creamed coconut, whereas coconut milk has got like things that make it thick and things that make it gloopy and things that make it liquid. It's like being kind of reconstituted, and you kind of end up in this pool of what are you actually eating? What is this food? So creamed coconut is a much simpler ingredient to work with, and you can just rehydrate it or make it into a kind of milk with hot water in a cup, say, on the side, and then you can add it to the curry or this belly warmer. If Sheila eats meat, she could add minced beef as well. Though the shiitake mushrooms have a lot of protein in them too. So let's just have a look in praise of mushrooms at shiitake mushrooms. So I just bought some shiitake mushrooms this evening that were reduced in the supermarket, and I have just put them on the balcony to dry in the sun. And I'm very lucky that I can do that because there is sun here. And actually, in Europe, there's a lot of sun at the moment as well. So if you find like reduced price shiitake in the supermarket, do buy them and dry them, because it stimulates this amazing conversion to vitamin D2. So it's one of the foods that is credited for keeping people well through the winter in like Japanese mountain hermitages, for example, where they're not having oily fish and there's not much sunshine through the winter, but if they've got their dried shiitake, they'll stay well. So it's really interesting and a really significant food source and vitamin source. Coming back to the protein percentage, so like between 19 to 40% protein by dried weight in most mushrooms, and shiitake are in the higher end of that. All mushrooms are good for you in lots of different ways. So if you're like, wow, I don't have shiitake and I've never seen them, or they're outrageously expensive where I live, then just eat other mushrooms. I would just say to Sheila, look, you can use button mushrooms or chestnut mushrooms or whatever you've got available. It is worth considering getting organic mushrooms, because if they're grown on something that's kind of chemically, they are highly absorbent of that. So they're actually often used as a way to detoxify toxic land, because they just pull things out of the soil. So mushrooms are one of those foods that's worth, being a bit careful about the source of the mushroom. And then there's this lovely piece of research with regular consumption of 5 to 10 grams a day of dried shiitake by young adults over 4 weeks resulted in increased immune activation and reduced inflammatory markers. So that's pretty cool. That's really lovely. That's just like a small amount of shiitake mushrooms every day, and there's just a really tangible effect. So for Sheila, with her kind of burnout tendency to coldness, I'd be thinking, okay, we want to make sure that your immune system is well supported so that there's not going to be like a crash in the autumn and a difficult winter. Um, yeah, really nice way to support that transition time with food. So I'm gonna talk about the Chinese Medicine Nutrition Diploma. And then at the end, I'll take questions about the whole thing. So this is a little Chinese proverb. He that takes medicine and neglects diet wastes the skills of the physician. So here we come into the impact of food therapy, of food as medicine, of domestic life and how that can support your body or how it can neglect the body, depending on how you eat. And so we created this Chinese Medicine Nutrition Diploma. We've run it twice. So the first intake was in 2023. So um, we've we created it because of this kind of acknowledgement that acupuncturists are often sitting in their practices and chatting with patients and thinking, oh, there's so much that you could do at home to support yourself and to continue this treatment, but the practitioner often doesn't have the knowledge base to be able to have those conversations or to be able to guide someone confidently. And also, it's important to know what we can't do. This diploma is not to make people into nutritional therapists, but rather to fill out your scope of practice as an acupuncturist with Chinese medicine knowledge around food, Chinese medicine relevant knowledge around food. So let's just talk a wee bit about it. So there's a lovely teaching team of real kind of experts. So I'm going to go from here. That's me drinking some tea. I teach a healthy aging session on this course. Um, this is Kirsten Chick, who is a wonderful nutritional therapist who teaches a lot on this course, and she brings in functional medicine and also five element theory. She's really at home in five element theory and TCM theory within functional medicine and nutritional medicine. This is Hayley North, who is a holistic chef who often teaches people how to cook for retreats. So she's interested in Qigong and yoga. She's also a Qigong and yoga teacher. And she brings in really beautiful, mindful practices to her cooking demonstrations that she does throughout the course. This is Martin Powell, who is pretty renowned as a mushroom expert. So he teaches a medicinal mushroom session within the course. This is Eriko Harada, who is a holistic chef in Japan, in Hyogo Prefecture. She runs a really delicious cafe where she makes nutritional, medicinal food and seasonal food. And she teaches some seasonal approaches to cooking and to medicinal food. And she also teaches some cooking demonstrations in the course. And this is Lindsay Fieldhouse, who is a naturopath and an acupuncturist who teaches a lot of fertility sessions in the course. And Lindsay's one of those people who, if you give her a topic, she will research it till nighttime or till the next day and bring in so many threads of research to her teaching. So she's a really wide perspective teacher. And then Robin Sheriff is a wonderful teacher who teaches fermentation, and he runs a project in Edinburgh called the Koji Kitchen, where he teaches people how to make food. So koji is the mold, which is the basis for sake and soy and miso, and he teaches people how to make those things. And within our course, he teaches some fermentation theory and practice, and it's a lot of fun. So that's that. So here's the syllabus. I'm not going to read it. You can read it. I'll give you a minute. So you can see we've got quite a range there, and we've made the syllabus so that the course is really clinically applicable, so that if you've got clients coming in with the common list of ailments that we see in our clinics, that undoubtedly in this course there will be some food-based recommendations that you could make to those clients. We also talk about different ways of like motivational interviewing, basically. So different ways of engaging your patient group with food recommendations, that it's not about just kind of bombarding people with lists of things, but rather like seeing what they are willing to work with and seeing how they can make those changes within the life that they are living. So it may not always look like what I've done for Jez and for Sheila, which is giving them a recipe. It may sometimes look like that. And then other times looking more like here, kind of one-to-one offering, one-to-one consultation to support your gut health through Chinese medicine nutrition. Or it might look like running a workshop on a specific theme. So one of our previous students ran a workshop with a chef, and she gathered up all of her menopausal patients and they cooked a menopause supporting meal together. And then she gave a presentation about menopause health in Chinese medicine, and they had a lovely dinner workshop. And then this is an example, like beautiful skin cooking workshop. So you could play around depending on what your client base is and your clinical focus and your interests, and see how it would shape your practice. And then some people use it as a way to kind of add to the offering that they already have. So building a mailing list is one example, or adding things to their blog that's food oriented. Obviously, food is really beautiful, or it can be really beautiful. So it's really nice for creating visuals for websites and social media and that kind of thing. And then here's a little testimonial from 2024. All the lecturers are really passionate, very knowledgeable, very approachable, loved the mix of practical and theory. Hayley's cooking demos in particular are brilliant, and her creations are all ones that are very relevant for patients I see day to day. So that's really as a nice example there of how it's shaped this person's practice, that they are giving recipes to their patients that are based on the cooking demos that they've seen on the course. And then here's a lovely Irena who was on the course this latest intake that we've just finished. She's there in her kitchen with her wonderful laughter. I can almost hear it from the picture. And so these are all things that she said, and I will just read through them because they're quite wonderful. So I'm going to start up here. I wanted to double check my knowledge on women's health, as I already had some background, but this course expanded it by at least 50%. The section on medicinal mushrooms completely blew my mind. I had no idea about their potential, and now I can confidently recommend them to my patients, backed by specific research and the right mushrooms for certain conditions. Then she says, I've gained a lot of confidence in talking about nutrition and lifestyle, especially since people in the West can be skeptical. But if something has worked for over 3,000 years, it definitely works. People who have followed the TCM approach of adding the good stuff and gradually letting go of the bad are seeing amazing results. And then she says, I never realized how much the course would change my relationship with food and my body. I used to be critical of my image of a woman. I used to be critical of my own body, but now when I look at that image of a woman, I see beauty instead of judgment. It all happened without me consciously realizing it, but now I feel so much more content and at peace with food and myself. And then she says, since the course, I've massively improved what I eat. I started to do my own red cabbage sauerkraut, adding mushrooms and cooking slower with more intention. I feel so much more comfortable in my body, and I think a lot of that comes from how I now think about food. I've learned to appreciate it as a luxury and a gift. So thank you, Irena, for sharing those with us, because it was really moving to hear. And yeah, I think it blew us away, me and the other tutors at the time when she said all these things. And so it's very kind of her to encourage us to share it with you guys. So the structure of the course is that it is online. It's delivered Fridays, 10 a.m. to 12 noon UK time. All of the sessions are recorded and they're available to watch online at any time. And we offer 2 hours of optional home study tasks each week. People vary in how they do that. Sometimes it's really structured. For some of our students, it's been really structured, and for others, it's like very informal, and they're just cooking for their family, or they're just taking photos of their food on their phone and kind of documenting different recipe ideas or reading a bit of research here and there. But some people are really strategic about it, and it's up to you how you want to navigate that. This course is not marked. It's a diploma that's we certify based on your attendance. So rather than it being we don't give you coursework that we mark. It runs over 30 weeks from the 9th of January to the 7th of August with one holiday on the 3rd of April. So it's every Friday morning. But of course you can watch the lectures whenever. The benefit of coming to the live lectures is that you can ask questions, and you're there in person with the teacher. So session notes are sent out prior to each teaching session to give you time to do any prep. And the teachers are available via email to answer questions for the week following the session. And we're offering an early bird. So the early bird fee is 2,800, which is it's available until midnight on Monday. And then after that, it'll be 2,900. And there are installment options too. So that's the kind of nitty gritty of it. There's more info here on our beautiful website. So CMND stands for Chinese Medicine Nutrition Diploma. So if you check out NCA, which is Northern College of Acupuncture.ac.uk/CMND, you'll find out more info about it. There are limited places, so it's first come, first serve, and that is all from me. And now I'm going to stop sharing and open up the floor to questions.